the conversion of the proteins into amino acids. Then the complex like carbohydrates are being converted into glucose. And finally, the fats are being converted into the fatty acid and glycerol. So you can see that the whole, like the major digestion, okay, it takes place in the small intestine. Okay, you can
Yes,
say
ma'am.
that the like it is the site of the complete digestion. So you can write down that the small intestine, it is the site of complete
Digestion.
digestion. Yes, correct. So it is meaning anything which has not been digested before in the body, meaning in the stomach or in the mouth, anything that has not been digested, finally it gets digested in the small intestine. Now you know that it receives the secretions from the liver and the pancreas. Do you remember I told you that the liver was the largest organ in our body? It is the largest gland in our body.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So liver is the largest gland. And then after that, you'll have to know that finally when everything, all of these components are broken down in the small intestine, then in the small intestine only the digested food is absorbed. Okay, the digested food is absorbed. Basically, the small intestine has tiny finger-like projections. Okay, they are known as the villi. Okay, so
Yes.
you can say the small intestine has tiny projections called as the villi. Okay, now these villi are extremely important. Why? Because they increase the surface area. Okay, the villi increase the surface area for absorption. Okay, surface area for absorption. Now, do you remember in the case of mitochondria, okay, the inner membrane had many foldings. Do you remember?
Yes,
Like
ma'am.
whenever you have studied cell chapter, or even in the case when we were talking about the digestion only, do you remember that I told you that the small intestine is like this?
Yes, ma'am.
And I told you that this convoluted reason, like the structure being it is the reason why to increase the surface area, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, there is another adaptation. Okay, see all of these structures like the villi. Okay, the villi are present in the innermost area of the small intestine like this. Okay, finger-like projections all throughout. Now, these are there to increase the surface area for absorption. Okay, the more villi, the more area is provided for absorption, meaning more and more nutrients can be absorbed from the small intestine. Is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So all the food that is finally digested, the nutrients or the digested food is taken up by the walls of the small intestine. Okay, the walls of the small intestine, they absorb the food particles. Is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. And these villi that we are talking about, first of all, they are there to increase the surface area. Secondly, apart from, increasing the surface area, the villi are richly supplied with blood vessels. Okay. You can write down the villi or the villi are richly supplied with blood vessels. Now, the reason why it is supplied with blood vessels is because since first of all, it is absorbing everything in this like the small intestine, isn't it? And
Yes,
after
ma'am.
absorbing, what it does is that it directly gives it to the blood, meaning the cells that are present in the body, blood is circulated everywhere, isn't it? Blood is
Yes,
present
ma'am.
everywhere in our body. So, since the villi are richly supplied with the blood vessels, what it does is that it, as soon as it absorbs the nutrients and absorbs the digested food, it gives it to the blood, and finally the blood circulates it all through the body. Is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Now this is the mechanism by which the food is finally absorbed in the body, and then it is transported to each and every cell. And then the food or the nutrients that has been absorbed, what is the reason? Why are we like absorbing it? Can you tell me?
Why are we absorbing what, ma'am?
The nutrients, like the digested food. Why do we need to absorb it? Like why we are
To get
Hmm,
energy.
very correct. Yes, to obtain the energy. That is why we are absorbing the nutrients, the digested food. The food is being digested for that reason. Okay, so that we can absorb it. Also, like apart from absorbing, first of all, like let us note it down, isn't it?
Yes,
You can
ma'am.
say that the reason why we absorb the nutrients, or you can say that the reason why we absorb the digested food is to get the energy, like how you told me. It is very correct. So you get the energy, then you need that digested nutrient or the food to build up new tissues, isn't it? So
Yes,
it
ma'am.
is this particular thing is utilized to build new tissues as our body needs it. Okay, so to build new tissues, and also apart from this, we can also use that energy to repair the old tissues. On isn't it the old tissues that need repairing to repair the old tissues? So this is also another function of why we need to absorb the food. Is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Now, this is all the events that like takes place in the small intestine. Now, from this, the undigested food, the food that has not been digested yet, it moves on to the large intestine. Okay, from the small intestine, the unabsorbed food is finally sent into the large intestine. Okay, now in the large intestine also villi is there. Okay, so what the villi over there does is that absorbs the water and minerals from the undigested food. Okay. Now, undigested food, these are the food that cannot be digested anymore. Okay. That is why they are undigested, isn't it?
Yes,
So
ma'am.
as soon as the undigested like food goes into the large intestine, what happens? The villi, which is present in the large intestine, it will absorb the
The
water.
minerals.
Yes, the water, the minerals from the unabsorbed food. Okay. And then after the water and minerals are absorbed, now the rest which is left, it is the waste product. Okay. And then
Okay.
this waste has to be taken out of the body, isn't it? And this waste material is removed from the body via the anus, isn't it? And
Yes,
this,
ma'am.
yes, and this exit of the waste material also again here anal sphincter, like how esophageal sphincter was there, same way
Yes.
in the case of egestion. Okay, in the case of egestion, or what is the other word? Excretion. Okay, in the case of egestion or excretion, anal sphincters. Okay, anal sphincters are present. Okay, these sphincters are regulating, like whenever we have the urge to defecate, we can control it, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, we can control it because of the presence of anal sphincters. Okay, these are under our control. Is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, very good. Now, this was all about your digestion. Okay, it was all about your digestion. Now, there is a little paragraph in the book that says dental caries, or it is about the tooth decay. Is there, it is like, is it there in your portion?
I don't think so, ma'am.
You don't think so? All right, let us read it out. Okay. Do you have your NCRT out there with you?
No, 1 minute, I'll get it.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. I got my readers.
Okay. Now see, there it says dental caries. Dental caries or the tooth decay. Now see, our teeth is made up of enamel. Okay. Enamel, you can say enamel. Okay. Now this
Yes, ma'am.
is and it is also made up of dentine. Now these are the two of like most like hardest substance there is. Okay, that is why our teeth is able to chew so much, isn't it? You can break down like hard candies from your teeth. The reason why? Because the teeth are made up, or like the covering is made up of the enamel. That is why we sometimes eat acidic food, like when we eat oranges or vitamin C rich food. So that is the reason why our teeth does not get corrode easily. Enamel is sort of like a you can call it as a protective covering of the teeth. Okay. Now, tooth decay. During that, what happens? That enamel gets softened. Okay. Is your teeth hard or soft?
Hard.
Hard. It is extremely hard. So, when the tooth decay takes place, during that, the enamel gets softened. Okay, softening of the enamel and dentine begins. Now, when it happens, so usually whenever we eat sugar rich food, okay, and then post eating that we do not brush our teeth, then what happens? The bacteria starts acting on the sugar that are there on the teeth, and since they are acting on the sugar, they produce such acids that will soften or demineralize the enamel. It means that it will make the enamel very weak. Understood?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. And that is the reason why the tooth decay occurs. Also, you must have noticed, after a while, when like it has been a little, delayed in the dental checkup normally, there is a yellow substance deposit in our teeth, usually in the back of the teeth. That is your dental plaque. Okay, the food that you eat starts slowly getting dislodged behind your teeth or in between your teeth. That is why it is very important to do the flossing, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am.
Flossing is important, brushing your teeth after your meal and before sleeping. And since when you leave the like dental decay or the tooth decay untreated, then it becomes very serious. The whole tooth is like, it turns black, it turns very gross, and then finally you have to get it out. It starts paining. So this is all about dental caries. Dental caries or the word tooth decay are the same thing. Okay? And it
Yes,
does
ma'am.
not happen at once, like I am eating sugar right now and now only my enamel is degraded. No, it is a gradual happening, meaning slowly builds up. Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, very good. Now let us move on to the second type of life processes, which is the process of respiration. Okay, respiration.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, this is the other life process. Now, see, in the case of respiration, what do? We use the oxygen, okay, and
Yes.
we
Release
will release the carbon dioxide, but that is breathing. Okay, the process by which you take in oxygen and give out carbon dioxide, this term is known as breathing. Okay, meaning the physical thing wherein you breathe in, you breathe out, isn't it?
Yes,
And
ma'am.
during breathing in, you take in the oxygen, and during breathing it out, you give out the carbon dioxide.
Carbon
But
dioxide.
right now we are talking about the respiration. Okay, so in the case of respiration, what happens is that we break down the glucose to release energy. Okay, the process by which you can break down the glucose to release the energy, that counts as respiration. Now, respiration is basically all the steps that leads to the release of energy. Okay. And usually when you break down a molecule, then it is accompanied by the release of a lot of energy.
Energy.
Yes. Okay. Now, what happens? Let us talk about the plants only. Okay. So, if we talk about the plants, the glucose molecule, okay, glucose, isn't that the product, the food product of the plant?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, when the plant takes in the uh, carbon dioxide along with the water in the presence of sunlight and chlorophyll, glucose is formed and oxygen is formed, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. Now this glucose is the final product in the plants. Now what the plants do is that they use this particular glucose to break it down to release energy. Okay. So when glucose, now you must know that already know the formula for glucose, isn't it? What is the formula for glucose?
C6H12O6.
Very correct. C6H12O6. So it means that glucose is a 6-carbon molecule, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Now there is a process. Okay, there is a process in which what happens? The 6-carbon molecule, which is the glucose, is broken down into a 3-carbon molecule. So from 6-carbon molecules into a 3-carbon molecule. This 6-carbon molecule is a glucose and the 3-carbon molecule is the pyruvic acid. Okay, pyruvic acid, or you
Okay.
can also call it as pyruvate.
Pyruvate.
Yes, pyruvate. So this process, it accompanies with a release of a lot of energy. Okay. See, whenever I say respiration, always keep it in your mind that it has something to do with the release of energy. Okay.
Yes,
To
ma'am.
release of energy is respiration. So during this process, wherein the 6-carbon molecule gets converted into a 3-carbon molecule, this is a very high energy yielding molecule. It takes place in the cytoplasm. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, it takes place in the cytoplasm, and this process, okay, this what am I writing? Cytoplasm. This cytoplasm. Yes. So, and it takes place in the cytoplasm, and this process wherein the 6-carbon glucose molecule is converted into a pyruvic acid or a pyruvate, which is a 3-carbon molecule, this is known as glycolysis. Okay, glycolysis. It means, lysis means the breaking down and glyco refers to the glucose. So the breaking down of the glucose is known as glycolysis. Is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, your book has not given the name glycolysis, okay? But they have shown that the glucose is being converted into pyruvate. So you should know the name, isn't it? So the
Yes,
name of
ma'am.
this process by which the glucose molecule gets turned into the pyruvate, it is known as glycolysis. Understood?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Now this pyruvate, which is formed by the glucose, this pyruvate is needed, or it is further converted into ethanol and carbon dioxide. So pyruvate, it is further used and converted into, the first molecule is the ethanol and the second molecule is the carbon dioxide. So the pyruvate can be converted into two. First is ethanol and then there is
Carbon.
carbon dioxide.
And
So
energy as well, right? Energy as well, right?
energy? No,
Yeah.
here no energy. What happens? This is not a very, very, you can say it is not a very boonful process. Rather, see, ethanol is a type of alcohol. Okay. And carbon dioxide, so you already know. So pyruvate is being converted into either an alcohol or a carbon dioxide. Okay, and this process is known as fermentation. Okay, this process is known as fermentation, and this process is anaerobic. Do you know
But
the meaning of anaerobic?
yes, ma'am.
Tell me, what is the meaning of anaerobic?
where respiration, where I'm not getting
Yes,
the
tell
word.
me if it is anaerobic respiration only, what is the meaning of anaerobic in the case of anaerobic respiration?
And I can get the word. It's where air is no oxygen is.
You are right. Say it. Say it. You are right. Oxygen, any respiration that takes place
Yes,
in the absence of oxygen, meaning
yeah, in
here,
the absence of.
yes, oxygen is absent. So this process is anaerobic. And a process where oxygen is present will be called as?
Aerobic respiration.
Very good. Aerobic respiration. So here the fermentation process is anaerobic, meaning it takes place in the absence of air or the absence of oxygen. Okay. Now this
Yes, ma'am.
breakdown, you can know the site. So the breakdown of pyruvate, okay, this fermentation or the breakdown, it takes place in the mitochondria. Okay, the site is the mitochondria. Is it clear?
Yes,
Yes.
ma'am.
Site.
But in readers in the figure in reader it says energy as well. Ethanol plus carbon dioxide plus energy.
It says energy. Okay then. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
And for your class, okay, you can say that energy is also there. Okay. And okay, why should I like tell you a very like out of the syllabus thing? So for this, you can say yes, energy is also released. Okay. Yes, I saw that even in that flow chart, plus energy is given, isn't it? That is what you're
Yes,
talking
ma'am.
about.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay. Then energy released is accompanied here. Is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Very good. Now, this process like breaks up the 3-carbon pyruvate molecule. See, the pyruvate molecule is a 3-carbon molecule, isn't it? Now,
Yes,
the
ma'am.
3-carbon molecule gets broken to give 3 molecules of carbon dioxide, isn't it? Now, carbon
Yes,
dioxide is a 1-carbon molecule, isn't it? So, further, the pyruvate is being broken and it is done in the like in the absence of oxygen, meaning the oxygen is absent there and energy is released. Okay. Now the other product apart from carbon dioxide is water. Okay. And yes,
yes, ma'am.
tell me, were you saying something?
Yeah, this takes place in East. It says it takes place in East
Yes,
and
takes place in yeast. Now, yeast is an organism that is usually used for fermentation processes. You must have heard that in the making of bread, nutritional yeast is
yes,
put
ma'am.
so that it, the reason why we put yeast in the bread making is because it releases carbon dioxide. Have you ever like noticed that there are tiny holes in your bread?
Yes, ma'am.
Sometimes big holes are also there. So
Yes,
those
ma'am.
holes are there because of the release of CO2 by the yeast. Okay. And
Yes,
yeast
ma'am.
is a unicellular fungus. Okay. It is a unicellular fungus. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. And it performs the process of fermentation. Usually,
Fermentation.
yes, usually the fermentation very commonly takes place in the yeast only. Is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, very good. Now, the process which takes place in the presence of oxygen, like this process, the pyruvate being converted into the carbon dioxide, water and energy, this process is taking place in the presence of
Mito.
oxygen. Okay, yes, it is taking place in the mitochondria. The site is the mitochondria, but
Yes, ma'am.
it is taking place in the presence of oxygen. So when
Oxygen.
oxygen is present, what is that reaction known as?
Aerobic respiration.
Very good. It is known as aerobic respiration, meaning it occurs in the presence of oxygen. That is why this is known as aerobic respiration. Okay. Now, if we compare the release of the aerobic respiration and the anaerobic respiration or any anaerobic process, the aerobic process energy will always be greater than the anaerobic. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, sometimes in our muscle cells, okay, the muscles that we have, like when we work out or when we run, so in that time there is a shortage of
Accumulation.
yes, at that time what happens, there is a shortage of oxygen, isn't it? When you, like, you must
Yes.
have noticed, when you run out of air, isn't it? That is why
Yes,
we
ma'am.
feel like out of breath. So that is where, that is the absence of oxygen during that time. So at that time the pyruvate, okay, at that time the pyruvate is broken down, or it is converted into lactic acid. Okay, whenever in our muscle cells anaerobic condition arises, the pyruvate, which is a 3-carbon molecule, gets converted into lactic acid and energy. Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
and during this step energy is released, isn't it? And
Yes, ma'am.
it causes cramps in our body. So you must have felt that when you run a lot, there is a cramping in your legs sometimes. Your legs
Yes, ma'am.
become stiff.
Yes.
Yes, this is because lactic acid build up in our muscles. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Now see, any type of energy which is released either by the anaerobic respiration or by the aerobic, all those energy, it is immediately used to synthesize ATP. Okay. ATP is,
Adeno.
tell me, adeno.
Uh, adenosine triphosphate.
Very correct. Adenosine triphosphate is the full form of ATP. And as soon as the energy is released in the cell, okay, that energy is used to synthesize this ATP molecule. Okay. Why? Because ATP is the energy currency of our cell. You must have read this in your previous class, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am.
Energy currency of the
Currency.
cell. This is currency of the cell. Now see, why it is known as the energy currency? Because wherever we need or require energy to do work, at that place ATP is synthesized. Okay. And ATP, when ATP breaks down, okay, then a lot of energy is released. When you break down ATP, you can write down that the breakdown of ATP releases a lot of energy. Okay, this is the reason why ATP is known as the energy currency of the cell. Is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. And there is one thing you must know, that if you are showing the breakdown of ATP, then you will show it like the ATP is turned into ADP plus PI, which is the inorganic phosphate. Okay. And
Yes,
if the
ma'am.
reaction is reversed, meaning if you say ADP plus PI is forming ATP, that ATP synthesis is taking place. This is ATP synthesis and this is ATP breakdown. Is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, very good. Do you have any doubts up till now?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Now see, since the whole process of aerobic respiration, if we talk about, it takes place in the presence of oxygen. And since it takes place in the presence of oxygen, it means that our body needs to synthesize more and more oxygen. It needs oxygen, isn't it?
Yes,
And
ma'am.
since we can't synthesize oxygen on our own, we take it from the atmosphere, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. And if we talk about the plants synthesize oxygen by the process of photosynthesis.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. And that oxygen that the plants give, we take in, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, we breathe it in. Whereas if we talk about the plants, they take the carbon dioxide along with the water, and then they form the glucose and the oxygen. So in the case of plants, they make their own oxygen. But can we make our own oxygen?
No, ma'am.
No, we cannot. So we depend on the plants for the oxygen. They will make the oxygen and we will breathe it in. Okay. Now,
Yes.
there are organisms that are present in the water. So how do they breathe?
Through gills.
That is correct. But which gas do they take? Like how do they get oxygen?
They take oxygen
Yeah,
through
but
gills.
that is, you are right. They use the gills. But
The
how they
dissolved oxygen
correct,
in
correct. Dissolved oxygen is there, isn't it? Same,
yes,
the
ma'am.
oxygen is present in the atmosphere also. And there is some, you must have noticed that there are some fishes that come out of the water, take in the oxygen, and then go again inside. The whales, if you must have noticed the whales, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am.
So the fishes usually take up oxygen and they breathe through their gills. Okay. And this
Yes,
oxygen
ma'am.
is then taken up by their blood. But in the case of some organisms like the whales, what the whales do? They come out of, you must have seen in the videos also, the whales come out of the water and then they move back
Yes,
in
ma'am.
again.
I just saw today because since like the official website here posted whales.
Okay. Yeah. So see, that is so fascinating, isn't it? Whale is such a
Yeah.
huge organism. It comes out of the water. And the reason why it comes out is to get the oxygen only. Okay, from the atmosphere. That is why, because its body is very big. So it requires a lot of oxygen. So that is why. Okay. Now,
Yes, ma'am.
talking about the terrestrial like a terrestrial organism like us humans, the all the organisms that live on the land. So what we do, we take the oxygen from the
In the
atmosphere.
atmosphere.
Yes, the air. So that is why. And then there are some like we have organs, like we have lungs, isn't it? Our lungs
Yes,
are
ma'am.
there to breathe. So the whole thing, and even when we take in the oxygen, that oxygen is transported into all of our body. And how do we breathe in? We breathe in from our nostrils, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. From the nostrils, the air that enters the nostrils, first of all, we have very tiny hairs in our nose. Those hairs are there to filter the air.
Yes.
Okay. So the nasal hair, they filter the air that we get from the atmosphere, and then also it sort of lines it with the mucus also. Mucus is also there, and it also makes the air exactly like the temperature of our body, isn't it? And
Yes,
then
ma'am.
only the air is passed into our windpipe, and finally it moves into our lungs. And
Yes, ma'am.
you must have noticed that our windpipe is made up of cartilaginous rings. This is the reason
Yes.
why our like the
The air
windpipe
passage does not collapse.
yes, yeah, it does not collapse. The reason why? Because it is made up of cartilaginous rings. Okay. Now finally, the after passing through the pharynx, which is the windpipe, the this thing is there, which is known as the primary bronchi, and then it divides into smaller tubes, and finally we have a balloon-like structure, which is known as the alveoli.
Alveoli.
Yes. Now this is the site. Alveoli is the site of the exchange of gases. Okay, this is the site of exchange of
Change
gases.
of the
Yes, meaning here the oxygen is given to the blood and the carbon dioxide is taken from the blood. And then the carbon dioxide finally is taken out of our body. Understood? And
yes, ma'am.
the alveoli, the blood, all of these work together for this process. Okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Now what happens whenever we breathe, like normally only, so there is still some amount of air left in our lungs. Okay. That is known as our residual volume. Okay. Residual volume. Just imagine if every air of our body is taken out, then we will be like lifeless, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. That is why a residual volume of air is present in our lungs. Okay? It is always there. Understood?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, whenever the size of the body of animal is large, okay, so then diffusion it cannot like transport the gases, isn't it? Diffusion, like the process of diffusion, is for small distance only. But in case of
Yes, ma'am.
larger distances, diffusion cannot take place. So in that time, in human beings, there is a respiratory pigment which is known as hemoglobin, isn't
Yes.
it? Hemoglobin. Hemoglobin. Now, hemoglobin is present in the blood only. Okay.
Yes,
Now, the
ma'am.
blood, it is responsible for the transportation of gases. Okay. So, the hemoglobin, which is present inside the blood, so hemoglobin transports the carbon dioxide and the oxygen both. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So if you see like what is the chronology here? So our blood contains the RBC. RBC, you know, red blood cells.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Now the RBC contains the hemoglobin. Okay. And this hemoglobin transports all the gases in our body.
Yes, ma'am.
Understood?
Yes, ma'am.
So this was all about your respiratory system. Is there any doubts?
No, ma'am.
No doubts?
No doubts.
Okay, very good. Now let us talk about the transportation in human beings. Okay, now see, we saw that food, water, waste, and even the oxygen and everything, all of this was transported by the blood. Do you remember? As I told you that the food that we absorb is given to the blood. The oxygen here also, hemoglobin transports it, but again, hemoglobin is present in the blood only. So blood is coming everywhere, isn't it? For the purpose of transportation. So blood, you can call the blood as the fluid connective tissue. Blood is your fluid
Fluid connect.
connective tissue. It means that anywhere there is the need of transportation, or there is a need of, you know, making things, you know, carrier, the blood is there. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So the blood, it consists of a fluid medium. Blood consists of plasma. Okay. Meaning plasma is present in the blood, and plasma is responsible. It transports the
Transport. Okay.
yes. The food is transported by the plasma only. Then also the carbon dioxide is transported by the plasma, and along with it, nitrogenous waste. Yes, correct. Nitrogenous waste, all of these things are transported by the plasma. And oxygen, as I told you, is carried out by the red blood cells. And inside the red blood cells, what is present? Tell me. Inside the red blood cells, what is present that transports the oxygen?
Blood.
No. Blood contains RBC, and RBC contains what? I told you. Do you remember this? This chart that I showed? Hemoglobin. Okay.
Yes.
So hemoglobin is present in the RBC, and hemoglobin is responsible for the transportation of oxygen. So in general, RBC, since RBC contains the hemoglobin, is it clear?
Yes,
Now,
ma'am.
now there are many other substances like the salt and all of these little chemical compounds. These are transported by the blood only. Okay. Now see, the blood is pumped by the heart. Okay. It is pumped by heart, and heart is the pumping organ. It is a muscular organ. Okay. So heart is our muscular organ, which the size of the heart is as big as your fist, isn't it? So heart, if we talk about the heart, so heart is a pumping muscular organ. It is an organ that is responsible for the pumping thingy. Okay. And what it pumps? So it pumps the blood.
Blood.
Okay. So the heart, now you must remember that the human heart. Okay. The
It
human
has.
heart. Tell me how
It
many
has four
chambers?
chambers.
Correct. Has 4 chambers. Do you know the names of the chambers?
Left atrium, left ventricle, right atrium, right ventricle.
Yes. So it means that there are 2 atria, isn't it? And
Yes.
2
Two
ventricles.
ventricles.
Now in the atria, we have left atria and then we have right atria or auricle, isn't it? Auricle
Yes.
and atria are the same thing. Okay. And then
Yes.
in the ventricle also we have left ventricle and then we have right ventricle.
Right ventricle.
Yes, correct. Very correct. So this is how the heart of the human is 4-chambered. Okay. Now, the carbon dioxide rich blood. Okay, the blood which contains the carbon dioxide is the dirty blood. You can call it deoxygenated blood. So this blood, it has to reach the lungs so that the carbon dioxide has to be removed. Okay, and the lungs will provide oxygen to the blood, making it oxygenated blood. And then this blood is given to the heart, and then the heart pumps it out to the whole body. Understood?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So for the first step, the oxygen-rich blood from the upper chamber of the heart. Okay. Like, see, first of all, it comes from the lungs. You must remember that O2 rich blood comes from the lungs. Okay. From the lungs, it will go into the upper chamber of the heart, meaning the left atrium. So
Left
here,
atrium.
it will go to the
Left atrium.
Now, from the left atrium, what happened? It relaxes. Okay. So now
Yes.
the left atrium relaxes. Relaxation and contraction, you understand?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So the left atrium relaxes and the left ventricle expands as soon as the left atrium relaxes. Okay, the left ventricle expands. It expands to receive the blood from the
Left atrium.
Yeah, yes, the left atrium. So it receives the blood. Now, after that, what happens? The deoxygenated blood, it comes from the body. Okay, like how the oxygen-rich blood, which is the oxygenated blood. You can call it as oxygenated blood. So it comes from the lungs, whereas the deoxygenated blood, meaning the blood which has the carbon dioxide and no oxygen. Okay, so the deoxygenated blood comes from where? It comes from the body. Comes from the body,
From the body.
Yes, from the body. And where does it move to? It moves to the right atrium.
Right atrium.
Yes. From the right atrium, again the right atrium
relaxes and the right ventricle expands.
Very correct. The right ventricle expands. Now it expands so as to collect the blood from the right atrium.
Right atrium.
Yes. So now the right ventricle expands and it gets filled with the blood from the right atrium. Okay, as soon as the blood is pumped, then the left atrium, okay, it carries the blood to the whole body, Okay, and finally walls are present. Now see, every single chamber, it has walls present, so that the blood that is coming from the left atrium to the left ventricle, it does not move backward. Okay, that is why walls are present. Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
okay, walls are present to stop the backflow of blood. Backflow of blood. Is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So this is all about your heart and how blood comes to the different chambers of the heart. Okay. Now, let us talk about what happens in the lung side. Okay. So see,
Yes, ma'am.
in the lungs, oxygen is more in number as compared to carbon dioxide. Okay. And as
Yes, ma'am.
soon as the blood reaches the lungs, what happens there? It like the blood mixes with the oxygen and makes it oxygenated blood. Understood?
Yes, ma'am.
That oxygenated blood is transported to the whole body. Is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
The oxygenated blood is finally transported to the whole body. Now, when we talk about the deoxygenated blood or the blood that is dirty, it is going into the lungs finally, and then from there the carbon dioxide is breathed out of our body. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Now there are many like for us humans, our heart is four chambered. But if you will talk about the amphibians, or let's talk about the fishes. Now fishes have only two chambered
Two
hearts.
chambers.
Okay. And in the case of amphibians and reptiles, three chambered heart is there.
Ma'am, can you explain the lungs part again?
The lungs part.
Yes.
See, the lungs, at the lungs, the amount of oxygen is more. Okay. So the
Yes.
oxygen goes into the blood, and this blood is finally transported to the different parts of the body, wherever oxygen is
The
needed.
oxygenated blood from the heart.
Yes. And talking about the deoxygenated blood is pumped by the heart. Okay, first of all, the deoxygenated blood comes from the different body cells. Okay, it goes to the heart, it gets pumped, and then it moves into the lungs. Okay, it is carried to the lungs. And what happens in the lungs is that the lungs, as soon as the carbon dioxide rich blood reaches the lung, the carbon dioxide moves out of the blood and the blood is become now oxygenated.
Oxygenated.
Understood? Now this is
Yes.
that mechanism that takes place at the lungs. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
Yes.
ma'am.
Now talking about the different kinds of like chambered hearts in different animals. So now see, the reason why now in us and in all the vertebrates, okay, the circulation is known as double circulation. Okay. Now the reason why it is known as double circulation, it is because first of all, the blood, it goes through the heart, and also it is moving through the lungs also, isn't it?
Yes,
So
ma'am.
there is a two cycles are going on. This is the reason why the circulation in us is known as the double circulation. Is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So then this is all for today's class. Okay. The whole
Yes, ma'am.
circulatory mechanism we have discussed, the end of digestion we have discussed, and then in the next class we'll talk about the vessels of our body and the platelets. So up
Yes,
till now,
ma'am.
do you have any doubts?
No, ma'am.
No doubts. You can go through your book once. If you have any doubts, you can ask me.
So, the oxygenated blood from our heart, it goes to the lungs.
Different parts of the body.
Yeah, different parts of different parts of the body. Mm. So oxygenated blood goes to the different parts of body, not
Yes.
lungs.
The deoxygenated blood goes to the lungs to get oxygenated, so that the carbon dioxide is taken out and the oxygen is given in. Okay.
But if the blood goes, like the deoxygenated blood goes to okay.
The lungs.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Since it goes there and in the lungs, oxygen